Thanks. This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com. And today we have the original Lord Humongous, Jeff Van Camp Sr. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure to have you. We recently were able to post your interview with Cheap Heat Productions on this channel, and it was very interesting. Where are you based now?
I live in South Florida.
Okay.
It's very hot here, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's hot in Canada right now, but I'm sure nowhere near what it is there.
It is steaming outside, that's for sure.
Are you married or anything?
Yes, I am. I got remarried to my beautiful bride. We've been married now since 2018.
Did you ever have any kids?
I have two sons. One's he's a police officer in Boca Raton. Another one is a captain in the United States Air Force.
Oh, wow. You must be very proud.
Yeah, very proud. They both of them graduated from college, playing college football. My youngest son, he enlisted in the Air Force. And as the officer, if you go in with a degree, you go in automatically as a corporal. So the colonel in his unit wanted my youngest son, Brandon, to be a officer in the Air Force. So he went into officer candidate school, came out a second lieutenant. Now he's a captain, and they just paid for his master's degree at Auburn University.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. What was your athletic background before wrestling?
Oh, actually, I'm from Indiana originally. I played football from a little school in New Albany, Indiana, right across the river from Louisville, Kentucky. Very proud of the Bulldogs, and I was lucky enough to get a full football scholarship to the University of Louisville, and I played ball at University of Louisville from 80 to 83. I got injured with my right knee, and I wanted my ultimate dream was going to NFL, but I ended up having to kind of retire from football because of my right knee. At the time, it was ACL damage, and the doctor told me, Jeff, if you continue playing, you're going to have a limp for the rest of your life. So I decided to hang up the football cleats, and I went into wrestling. And that's where, they hired football players at the University of Louisville, where I played, to do concerts and walk the wrestlers to and from the ring at Louisville Gardens. And that's how I got to know the wrestlers. That's how I got to know Jerry Lawler and Austin Idol and all those great guys. Rick Gibson, Robert.
Were you stronger when you were wrestling or playing football as far as in the gym?
I was strong in football. After when I got out, I became, I guess, as you get a little bit older, 25, 26, I became really, really strong. My max bench was 500 pounds, squatted 6, deadlifted 650. I was a very strong individual at the time, weighing 300 plus pounds in wrestling.
And what was your legitimate height?
My original height, I'm 6'5". Now,
okay.
my oldest son is 6'6". And he played football for Florida Atlantic University under the tutelage of Howard Snellenberger. And a lot of people think that Howard Snellenberger recruited my son Jeff Jr. Because of me, but actually Howard Snellenberger didn't get to Louisville until '85, and I left in '83. But one of his assistant coaches, Gary Nord, who was the coach at who helped under Coach Brom at Purdue, he recruited. He was a general assistant at U of L when I was playing. He got to know me, and that's who he actually recruited my oldest son as quarterback. And he was in the 2011 football draft.
Oh, wow. So as far as becoming a pro wrestler, I guess the wrestlers noticed you from doing security and stuff and thought based on your size that you'd be good in the wrestling ring?
Yeah, I had a great, I was very willing to learn from the wrestlers. All the guys, everybody, Jerry specifically said, Jeff, you got the size and the build, and you got the temperament to be a wrestler. And he invited me and one of the other guys along with me playing football, his name was Pete Bowen, to Memphis, Tennessee to learn how to wrestle. At the last minute on a Saturday, they said, come on down on this Saturday at Mid-South Coliseum. I'll meet you in Mid-South at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I'll teach you how to wrestle. Well, at the last minute, Pete kind of chickened out, and my brother and I went to Memphis. So my brother and I got in the ring at the Mid-South Coliseum for about 3 hours on a Saturday with Jerry the King Lawler. And at the end of the 3 hours, my brother was wore out and said, "Jeff, I can't do this. I don't want to do this." And I loved every minute of it because I was pretty athletic. And my brother decided not to. And I said, "Absolutely, Jerry, I'm here. I'm here to stay." And he gave me a booking sheet and told me these are the towns I need to be in. And I went by Jeff Van Camp, the football player in Memphis, Tennessee, starting out.
What was the training like that your friends didn't want to do it anymore?
I guess just the biggest thing, like my brother told me, he wasn't used to the big crowds, and I was, and playing college football. I had a helmet on, but it didn't really bother me that much. And my brother didn't really want to go out there in front of all the crowd with a pair of tights and stuff. So, but that didn't really bother me that much, and I enjoyed every minute of it. And Jerry said, now you're a professional wrestler." I was extremely green, didn't know what I was doing.
So basically, they're just training you on the road and throwing you right into the mix?
That is exactly what happened. I had no idea what I was doing. I showed up in the small spot towns, they used to call them, and I learned under the tutelage of like Pat Rose and Buddy Landell. I don't know if you remember Buddy. Buddy, I didn't, actually at the time, I didn't even have a pair of wrestling boots. And we was in Nashville, Tennessee, and Buddy was kind of laughing at me. We was in these small towns in northern Mississippi and Memphis, Tennessee and Kentucky and Indiana. And Buddy goes, "Jeff, I'm going to get you a pair of my wrestling boots. I think they'll fit you." So we was in Nashville, Tennessee one night, and he gave it to, he was a bad guy, was a good guy, and he brought the shoes to the referee. Referee brought them over to me and said, "This is from Buddy," and he gave me actually my first pair of wrestling boots.
Do you have any stories about Buddy? Because he could have been a world champion, but sadly, some of his outside the ring activities screwed him. But I heard overall he was a very nice guy.
Buddy was probably one of the nicest guys. He was willing to teach you if you was willing to learn and listen. And that's exactly where I pretty much learned from him and Austin Idol. They taught me a whole lot. I mean, you really don't know what you're doing. You can say what you want to in the locker room, but when you actually learn what you're doing in the ring. And that's what I did. I listened to what he had to do and tell me what to do and what to do and how to do it. And we just went out there and wrestled. And most of it was, because I wrestled a little bit in high school. And so I knew a little bit about wrestling. So I knew about the amateur moves, but I didn't know how to apply them to the professional level.
Was the Honky Tonk Man still kicking around Memphis at all at that point?
I can't remember. That's one good thing I don't remember. I know Lance Russell interviewed me a few times. Jimmy Hart was fantastic. Austin Idol, we became really good friends. And Stormy Granzik, he come from Indianapolis. He was Dick the Bruiser's son-in-law, and he's actually the one with Jerry Lawler. Eventually, after about 8 months, he came to me and said, "Jeff, I can't really teach you that much anymore. It's time for you to move on to a different territory." And Stormy knew that. And Stormy said, "Jeff, this is a great opportunity for you to learn some more from a different territory, different perspective from different guys, and how to work." And he said, "Jeff, I'll call my father-in-law, Dick the Bruiser, and he made it possible for me to go to Indianapolis and work under the World Wrestling Association under Dick Bruiser and Bobo Brazil and Jerry Valiant and all those great guys, Abdullah the Butcher and King Kong Brody, you name it, they were there. And I was learning from them."
Was the Sheik at all in that territory at that period?
No, the Sheik was actually the Iron Sheik was in Memphis when I was in that area. And at the same time, I was coming up. I was learning from Jerry Lawler, and they were doing the big spot with Andy Kaufman, as you remember. I was in the same area with Andy Kaufman and Jerry Lawler, and man, it was big crowds, huge. And I remember one time I had car trouble when I was outside Louisville, Kentucky, in Shepherdsville, I believe it was. I pulled into a barbecue restaurant. I can't name it. And I walked in, and there said Andy Kaufman and his girlfriend, wife, and he invited me over to the table. So he sat with me. My mom and dad was coming. I called them, told them I had car trouble, and they driving from New Albany. It was about maybe an hour drive. So we sat there and ate dinner and talked and had a great conversation with Andy Kaufman. What a great guy. He did not act like he did in the ring. He was a down to earth, normal human being. He was very nice and very cordial to me. And he offered me to travel with him back to Memphis. And I said, I appreciate it, but I needed a car because I had to go to and from because I was in different towns he was in.
Wow, that must have been quite something because there wasn't that much crossover with celebrities in wrestling in those days to have a guy that's right off of Taxi having dinner with him or waiting around with him at a restaurant. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, I wish we didn't have cameras back then like we do now. I wish I would have took a lot of pictures of everything, but to confirm everything I'm saying, I'm letting you know what happened. He was an extremely nice guy. We sit down and had dinner together, and he waited for me and my mom and dad to show up. And then after they pulled in, we introduced him to my mom and dad, and then he went on to Memphis, and I pretty much followed him behind him in a different car. But super nice guy, super nice guy.
Was he working other towns as well, or just mainly doing?
No, he was working different towns out of Memphis, Louisville, Kentucky. I mean, I worked with him in Evansville, Indiana, Nashville, Tennessee, anywhere and everywhere Jerry Lawler was. That's where Andy Kaufman was. But, as you know, the base was Memphis, Tennessee.
Okay. I never knew that he did the whole circuit. That's amazing.
Yeah, Andy Kaufman, he was right there with all the guys. I mean, he was right there with everybody. I remember I was in several towns with Andy, Lexington, Kentucky, Louisville, Kentucky, Evansville, Indiana, Nashville, Tennessee, all the big towns,
Was Dutch Mantel around in those days?
Oh, yeah. Oh, Dutch. Oh, Harry Dutch. I did travel with Dutch a few times in those days, that's for sure. What a great guy. And he just, great stories. Love to drink some beer with him, that's for sure. He's a great guy.
So as far as Indiana, how was the health of that territory at that time with Dick the Bruiser getting older and everything? Was it still fairly strong, or how was it?
No, it was actually a really good territory. I learned a lot. We traveled all across Indiana, southern Michigan, Illinois, northern Ohio, and we even had a couple of shows in Iowa, matter of fact. And they were sellout shows everywhere we went. Dick the Bruiser was, he didn't go to all the shows, but Hammond, Indiana, and Indianapolis, all the big shows, he was always there. And, TV was based out of Indianapolis. That's where we did our TV and our commercials and everything, with his son-in-law at the time, Stormy. Stormy was one of the guys with me, but, I had to pull out a couple of the magazines. Anyway, he was there, and like Jerry Valiant, and I know at the time Saul Creechman, and now you know him as Scott Romer.
Yeah, I know Scott. I've interviewed him before.
Yeah, he was a son-in-law of Dick the Bruiser as well.
Yes, he was. 100%. He documented that territory very well too, with all of his photos.
You know what? I asked him that one time. I said, "Did you get any good photographs of with me with Dick?" And at the time he said no, and he wishes he did, but he didn't do it. And I'm pretty upset about it. At the time we didn't have a whole lot of cameras and cell phones, and so if it wasn't for the professional photographers taking pictures, we didn't get a lot of pictures.
At what point in time did you actually become Lord Humongous?
Well, I was I was in Indianapolis territory, and I was working out of, I believe, Hammond, Indiana, and Chicago. And Austin, we didn't have cell phones, so what I did, I'd call home maybe once or twice a week to just check in with my mom and dad. And at the time, Austin Idol and Jerry Lawler had my home phone number, and Austin had called my house and said, "Jeff, there's a individual that needs you to get in contact with, and this is his phone number," and Austin Idol. And I said, "Oh yeah, I know Austin, Mike McCord." And he said, "Well, get in touch with him. He wants to call you right away." So I was up in Chicago, and I made that phone call to Austin, Mike McCord. He said, "Jeff, Jerry Lawler, there's a guy in Memphis we want you to do this gimmick called Humongous. And he pretty much told me everything on the telephone. He said, I want you to come to Pensacola, Florida. That's where we're home based. Come to Pensacola and learn how to be humongous. And so I got with Dick the Bruiser, told him what I was going to do, and left his territory. And at the time, my wife and I drove to Pensacola, Florida, and actually stayed at Austin's house for a couple weeks learning how to be humongous before I was actually humongous. That makes sense.
Yeah, in Indianapolis, just before we get to Pensacola, you mentioned that you knew Bruiser Brody. Did you ever wrestle him, and what was he like from your interactions with him?
No, I didn't actually wrestle with him. I met him in the locker rooms. I got a lot of magazines here with his photograph. He was an amazing guy, very, very smart, very, very knowledgeable. It's a shame that he got murdered in Puerto Rico. God rest his soul. But he was a great guy. He was a great influence on me and on my career.
From a police officer's standpoint, what are your thoughts on what happened to him?
I don't know all the statistics or all the evidence that surrounded it. I just heard from other guys that he was murdered in the locker room and stabbed. And I think that's a shame.
Yeah. So Pensacola, was it still the Fullers running it at that point when you came there?
Yeah, Ron Fuller, and he owned the territory. And of course, Bob Armstrong, Bob James, he owned a portion of it, but Ron had the majority of the territory. And what a great territory. You had TV out of Dothan, Alabama. Everybody lived in Pensacola, and you traveled 7 days a week. It was fantastic. Every Monday night was in Birmingham, Alabama. Every Tuesday we was in Mobile, Alabama. Thursday nights was in Montgomery, Alabama, and the rest of the times Wednesday, Friday, and Saturdays we was in spot shows, and we knew we was always back home Sunday night in Pensacola at the auditorium downtown. Pensacola is fantastic, great territory. Met a lot of great guys.
I understand you won the NWA Alabama heavyweight title from Pork Chop Cash. How was those matches with him?
Pork Chop, he was, I can't say enough great things about him. He's a wonderful human being. I wish I could meet him right now. He's great. I mean, he taught me a lot, showed me a lot. He told me, it was kind of funny because sometimes when I would work with him, he'd always say, potato, potato. I had to loosen up a whole lot. So he was fantastic. What a great guy to work with. And he was amazing, very professional individual. Love him to death.
You did an angle with Ron Fuller himself there too, didn't you?
We did. I was a bad guy, and the territory at the time, a lot of people, you can see the attendance start going down a little bit. So Ron, and he said, I got this great angle. We're going to turn Humongous face, and this is what we're going to end up doing. And man, let me tell you something. Everybody, when I turned face on TV and turned against Ron, everybody in the whole territory in Alabama and everybody wanted to see me just beat the living hell out of Ron Fuller. It was fantastic. It was a sellout show in Dothan. Everywhere we went from that point forward, it was a sellout because they wanted me to just beat the hell out of Ron. It was great. What a great gimmick. What a great story. And I can't say enough great things about Ron. When I went to Ron Fuller's territory, Humongous was a new idea. And Austin Idol had to sell him on the gimmick. And then, I was a newcomer. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I wrestled as Jeff Van Camp, the football player. I wasn't Humongous till I got to Pensacola. So everything was new to me. And he took a big gamble with me. And I appreciate everything Ron did because he allowed me to work with my gimmick, learn and expand what I needed to be the best Humongous as I knew how to be. And he allowed me to do that. And thank God he did. Because right now I'm like 40 years later, I'm still having interviews, podcasts with people like yourself and who remember Jeff Van Camp as the Lord Humongous. And I appreciate that. I can't say enough great things about what he allowed me to do.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to argue you're the most famous and best Lord Humongous. Of course, Sid went on to have a great career as himself and started in that gimmick. But did they just give that to him based on your success? Because I can't imagine him like coming up with wanting to take your gimmick? He just doesn't seem like.
I don't really know how that ended up happening. I was out of the area at the time. I just know that I had left, and I just assumed that he was a big guy like myself, and I guess they just assumed that he could take over the gimmick and work it like I did. But I understand nobody could work the gimmick the way I did, and I appreciate that, because I took my talent and my gimmick seriously. And I wanted to learn. I learned from the best, Jerry Lawler and Austin Idol, Ron Fuller, and all those guys. And I wanted to make sure I did the best job I knew how.
Who were some of the guys you were friends with in the business?
Everybody I worked with we ended up being friends. A lot of great friends that have now since passed away. When I first went, the Armstrongs, the James, they were fantastic. Ron Fuller and we still talk and communicate. He's a wonderful guy. I like to talk to Austin Idol every once in a while, but he's staying busy doing what he does. I talked to Jimmy Hines up in Ohio. He does fantastic. As the Fantastics. Him and Tommy Rogers, we were friends. I stay friends with Jake the Snake. I like to talk to a lot of different guys. Jake, every once in a while, he'll invite me and said, "Jeff, come on, let's go fishing." We went fishing one time up in Wisconsin. We went fishing in Oklahoma. He's a great guy.
How did you get along with? I mean, it's nice that you got along with him, but for a while when he was kind of derailed, I know he's all better now, but when he was kind of on the dark side of things, and you were a police officer, did you still stay in contact with him in those years and just not talk about those type of issues?
Yeah, we never talked about those type of issues. I wanted to keep my friendship and my personal feelings about that to myself. Because he was a great guy, he's a great friend, and I just remember the good times. And then after, you're talking 30 years later, we're still keep talking to one another, and he'll say, "Jeff, let's go fishing." I got out of law enforcement, so let's go have a good time. Let's have a beer together again. And Jake doesn't drink anymore, so I'll just have an iced tea or lemonade, because it doesn't matter to me. I can either drink or not drink.
Yeah, and I'm happy that AEW has taken such good care of him now. He doesn't have to really worry about his next paycheck anymore.
Yeah, that's wonderful. He's a great guy. I mean, I'm glad they are taking care of him. That's true. Thank you.
How did you end up in Mid-South Wrestling?
Well, that's the thing. At every territory, I guess, you kind of, when it's time to move on. And just like Indianapolis, it was time to move on. Memphis, it was time to move on. Continental Southeastern Championship Wrestling, I got with Ron and said, "Yes, Jeff, it's time for you to move on, to expand, to get bigger and better." And that's the only way you can do it in Mid-South. And at that time, it was either Bill Watts or the Crockett's in the Carolinas. And it was a toss-up between both of them, because I knew Arn Anderson. Arn went to the North Carolina, the Ric Flair, because I had time working with Rick. He's a fantastic guy. He wanted me to go there, but Rick was pretty much all over the place. But I ended up going, Bill Watts, I ended up going with Bill Watts. I remember I was still in Pensacola, and he got me airline tickets to fly to Shreveport, and we were at the Boys Center there. And came in and worked, did a TV show with him, and that's where I got to meet Dick Murdoch. I mean, he put me over like you wouldn't believe. I mean, he's a great, great guy. I guess he has a lot of connections to people I knew, and I didn't know that at the time, but he got with Bill and apparently said he wanted to put me over in the territory, and God rest his soul as well. It was a great drinking a few beers with Dick, but he was a great guy, very professional man, that's for sure.
Dick was known as a real tough guy. Apparently, he had a really great punch where he could knock people out. Did you ever witness any of his escapades?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, he was fantastic. That's what I'm saying. When he put me over like he did in Mid-South on TV in front of, all the crowd, and after that, the gimmick was over in Mid-South. It was over the top what he did for me and how he put me over, and that was my great run in Mid-South based on him, and then the relationship I had with Hacksaw Jim Duggan and Butch Reed and Jake the Snake and all those great guys. It was fantastic. I had a great time.
Was John Nord around the time that you were in Mid-South?
Yeah, John was the Barbarian. Him and he was faced with Jake, and then we got with Saul Oliver Humperdinck was my manager at the time. What a great guy! That guy was so ugly, but that man got more women than you can shake a stick at. That man was ugly as homemade sin, but he got the women. That's for sure. I don't know how. I guess he just made them. He just loved to talk. And that's one thing, on TV and everything. All I could talk with was my eyes. I used my eyes wherever, But he talked for me, and then John Nord was there, and we got with Nord and said, let's do a great angle and do a tag team, and with me and John Nord as the Barbarian, and then it would have been Jake the Snake and Ted DiBiase, or Jake the Snake and Hacksaw Jim and Duggan. So we got together, we did that big spot on TV, and then next thing you know, maybe a week or two later, John Nord, we were driving, I think we was in New Orleans somewhere. It was either there or Lafayette. We was driving to Shreveport, and John was kind of saying, Jeff, I'm leaving. I want to tell you goodbye and thanks for everything. I was like, I didn't really understand what he was saying to me because I didn't put two and two together. He was saying goodbye. Well, when he left that area, Bill Watts kind of blamed me for his departure. And I said, dude, man, don't blame me. I didn't have nothing to do with it. I don't even know where John went. And so John, he kind of blamed me. And after that incident with John Nord, Bill Watts kind of blaming me for leaving the territory. My tenure at that time started going downhill, and you can see it because he blamed me for John's departure.
Were you there for that infamous fight that John Nord had with Butch Reed?
I heard about that. I wasn't there at the time. I mean, I was there, but I wasn't there. If you remember, but I know they had a big falling out. I think that might have been one of the incidents that played into John leaving Mid-South. And I've seen John since then. I understand he's got a lot of health problems as well. I wish him the best. And we talked about that. And every time I bring it up about why'd you leave, Bill Watts still hates my guts because of what you did. And he just kind of laughs. I can't use the language he used to tell me what he thought about Bill Watts, but I sort of concur with what he had to say about Bill because he blamed me for everything he did.
I know that Jake really hates Bill Watts, but obviously he was successful as a promoter. What are your thoughts overall on your dealings with him? Obviously, it ended badly.
Bill, he always said, he didn't want anybody to communicate. Well, baby faces and heels stay apart. And if you ever got into a fight, you better come out the victorious winner. And he believed in the no kayfabe. And he liked big guys and big men, and that's the reason why he had a lot of big men in his territory. And he put them over. And at the end, when I left his area, Bill Watts, he still owes me money because when I left, you work for Bill Watts for a week or two before you even get your first paycheck. So he still owes me quite a bit of money from the time I left his area back in '86.
I actually read in his book he always held people's pay 2 weeks.
I told you that's it. I told you that's exactly what he did. He held people's checks for 2 weeks, just for that reason. If you left the territory under bad terms, he kept your money. Well, shame on him. He knows better than that. He should make things right now and pay people the money that they rightly deserve because you don't steal people's money. That's what he did.
Now, I heard you say in your other interview, I've had some bad interactions with Terry Taylor myself. You mentioned in the other interview that you didn't really like him very much. Could you elaborate or give an example on anything?
I met Terry in Memphis, Tennessee. I didn't like him then because all he was a womanizer. I guess I don't know if he was married or whatever. It doesn't really matter. I just know Terry I don't think he had the right mindset to do what he was doing. All he cared about was one thing, and that was getting what he could get after the program was over with out in the street or alley somewhere. And he ended up being the booker in Memphis, in Mid-South after Dick Slater. And, he and I didn't get along in Memphis, so he took his attitude with him over to Mid-South. And then from there, it was between Bill Watts and Terry Taylor. I didn't really stand a chance. It was time for me to get the hell out.
You don't seem like you were the partying type at all, but out of all the territories you were in, which one seemed like the territory that had the most groupies?
Mid-South.
Mid-South? Oh, really? I'm surprised.
Yeah, Mid-South had the most groupies. That's for sure. They had the most. I only went out a few times because most of the time I was a homebody. I didn't want to go out because my gimmick. I didn't want people to I couldn't really go out with the guys. I didn't want people to know who I was. But every once in a while, we go to like the towns, Oklahoma City or Tulsa or somewhere, and they'd say, "Come on, Jeff, let's go out and have a beer." I said, "Okay." So we ended up going to one of the shows and having some beers together with John Nord and whatever. We did that a few times in Oklahoma and Tulsa and Dallas and Houston. A few times we went to Gillies. At one time, we was wrestled down at Gillies. So of course, you had to, when you worked there, you had to had to kayfabe my way into the big area. And I think Gillies is now closed, but I had to go in there and look at the bull riding,
Yeah, Houston was one of the territories where you feuded with Jake. That was Paul Bosch running it at that time, right?
I don't know. I always thought if it was always Bill Watts or the Von Erichs.
Yeah, they had a deal, right? There was some sort of crossover.
Right. So, I mean, we'd worked a few deals with the Erichs because I remember traveling with some of the Erichs going from Dallas to Oklahoma City or, all the bigger towns. We'd get in a van or whatever they'd do. Like Bill, we'd get a plane ticket from the office and say, "Jeff, you need to be in New Orleans this time." And then a week later, he'd pick us up in Oklahoma City or Houston or Dallas or somewhere. And that's one of the things we didn't have no idea where we were going. That's where he lived out of a suitcase and tried to find a gym the best he could to work out.
Was that before you were married when you were wrestling mainly, or did you have like a house where your wife was where you would go every once in a while?
No, we didn't. I didn't actually have a house at the time. We was just living in an apartment in a little town called Pineville, Louisiana. And I had a little apartment and we lived there and it was pretty much right outside of Alexandria, and she would drive us me and the guys, or Jerry West or, the referee, he'd drive to New Orleans. A week later, she'd pick us up in Houston, Texas or somewhere. Thank God she knew where she's going. But that's the woman I divorced later on after in law enforcement. I got me a great woman now. She's fantastic. Been married now 7 years.
Very good. What were some of the biggest crowds you wrestled in front of?
Most of the big towns. The biggest crowd I believe I wrestled. The biggest building was the Superdome. Thanksgiving night at the New Orleans Superdome, and we had literally had to take a golf cart from the dressing room to the ring. It was so far. And I didn't know exactly. I said, well, what I'll do is I'll stand up on the back of the golf cart and ride with my arms crossed to the ring. And that's exactly what I did. It was a sold out crowd, 85. And then what we did was soon as Jake and I was the main match, and we were told that we could not, once the match is over with, we had to hurry up, get back to the dressing room, get a pair of sweats on, not even change out of our gimmick. And they'd rush us out of the Superdome as fast as we could, and they drove us to the airport and hopped in a Learjet and flew us to Shreveport and wrestled again the same night.
Wow. As far as Eric Watts, was he just a kid when you were in Mid-South? I guess you probably didn't have much
interaction with him. Joe, with being a commentator, I do know that Bill had been in the beginning. I took a music video and did it out of Bixby, Oklahoma. And I think you can see that on YouTube.
Yeah, his other son made the music videos, right?
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
He ended up working, I think, maybe even for WWE at one point, or WCW. I heard.
I'm not for sure, but he did a great job with my video. It was at a machine shop, and the backdrop was it was a submarine engine we had in the back of the compound, and we used that as a backdrop.
I know you told the story before you were stabbed once by the fan. Was that your worst fan attack situation?
No, when I got stabbed. I was in Jackson, Mississippi. And I'll never forget. Jake, it was John Nord and Jake the Snake in the ring, and at the time, I got the cue when he was getting the better of John, and I was to run into ring and take over, and he and I was going to double team and double tap, beat the crap out of Jake. And that's what I did, and the fans were just, I mean, it was loaded to their hilt in Jackson, Mississippi, and they would not allow me to leave the ring, and that's when I got stabbed.
Yeah, those kind of things don't happen today. Did you kind of like the mystique that it had back then? I know there was more danger, but like now everything's out of the bag. Nobody takes wrestling serious anymore.
I love the gimmick, the aspect of it, because I wanted to kayfabe my gimmick the whole time. Driving to and from the ring about a mile from the building, I'd always wear a black hood over my head, like a hangman's hood. And I wore that in and out of the ring, to and from a mile or two from the ring, driving to the building. And I did that as well when I left the building. And I learned that in Pensacola, because Alcinado told me about that. So I was literally, even though we lived in a town called Gulf Breeze right outside Pensacola. After working at the Pensacola Auditorium, I would literally have to drive up Interstate I-110, take I-10 eastbound to exit 87 and drive it southbound to Highway 98 and come back to Gulf Breeze. I would get followed that much. I got shot off the road on Highway 87 one time for people who were still following me. And I got stabbed. I got shot at. So back then, people took it very serious, and I kind of contributed that to my kayfabe of my gimmick. I didn't want nobody to know who I was.
Were you in more danger in those years, or when you were a police officer getting in some sticky situations?
Both situations were bad. The reason I got out of law enforcement is because I got hit by a car on a traffic stop. So I had to medically retire. I've had 6 operations in the last 6 years because of my injuries sustained from getting hit by a car.
Oh, so you were outside of the car and another one hit you, or how did that happen?
Well, no, it was my partner who was working with me at 4:00 in the morning. He was pulling his person over. We thought he was a person driving under the influence, and he was driving northbound in the southbound lane on A1A in a little town called Ocean Ridge, right outside of Boynton Beach, Florida. And he was kind of speeding up to speed away, and my partner, and at the end intersection of A1A and Woolbright, he slammed on his brakes and came to a screeching halt, and my partner had to swerve to the right to avoid hitting him. And what I did was I backed up. I stopped my car about 20 yards behind him. I unbuckled my seatbelt and was getting out of my car and opened up the driver's door. And as I was stepping out, he put the car in reverse and came back and hit me head on. And that's what happened.
Oh, that's terrible.
He tried to kill me. He was an illegal immigrant. Now he's a 12-time convicted felon. His license has been suspended 9 times. He was doing fentanyl and cocaine, distributing it, as a matter of fact. He was sitting on a 45 with 31 rounds, and he only got 5 years in state prison. 5 years.
How is that possible?
That's a good question. That is a good question. If I could get in touch with some of these politicians, I would like to ask him that question. The same thing I do, because I got the police report and I got the Department of Corrections information from because I'm still under confidentiality with my address and everything, because I don't want this individual to know where I live. And he's an illegal immigrant, 12 times convicted felon, and he's out in the state of Florida with Ron DeSantis as the governor. So I'm a little upset about that.
It seems like state to state in the U.S., the punishments vary greatly, because we see in Texas, people are put away for a long time for some minor offenses overall. But you hear that story and it's crazy.
I don't understand it. I don't, I was in law enforcement for 30 plus years. I don't understand some of the convictions and how people, some people who with lesser offenses get more time than this guy. I don't understand it. I'll never quite understand the judicial system, but it needs to change.
Were you ever involved in any type of big drug bust?
Yeah, actually, I worked in the narcotics unit at the Escambia County Sheriff's Office for a few years, and we actually was on a big time marijuana drug dealer. We actually had to keep an eye on, believe it or not, 9 tons of marijuana, and we was working closely with the DEA.
Did your wrestling experience help you at all, as far as in those days, a lot of wrestlers did various types of drugs, so you'd see how people would act on, for instance, like cocaine. You'd be able to spot somebody that's on it based on your experience. Like,
I didn't really notice a whole lot back then with a lot of the narcotics. I knew it was prevalent, but I didn't actually get involved with it that much. Now, wrestling in law enforcement helped me out tremendously, because most of the people in Pensacola, when I became a law enforcement officer, they knew who I was, because everybody was it was on the news. Hey, Lord Humongous being a police officer. So, and I worked the projects pretty much the whole time I was there. I was on TV, had a TV program, but I never had any issues or problems with anybody. I treated everybody with respect, and they pretty much knew who I was, and I didn't have any problems. It was fantastic. I had a great time.
Was it a program like Cops?
It was. Remember America's Most Wanted?
Yeah.
Okay, it was mirrored after the America's Most Wanted program, where it was on a local level, where we profiled wanted fugitives for people's arrest, and I also did crime reenactments for people with unsolved murders and heinous crimes that needed to be solved. And I helped capture over 10,000 wanted fugitives in Pensacola and solved unsolved murders and crimes. And I'm very lucky and happy to report that I became Officer of the Year for the state of Florida in 2004.
Well, congratulations on that, and thank you for your service. As far as murders, if you could talk about it, what would be the worst murder situation you had to be involved with?
It's kind of hard we had several of them, but there was one individual. I was on the SWAT team for 9 years, and this individual, he was called the Interstate Bandit, and he would go up and down the Interstate I-10 and rob banks. And anyway, this individual had a very bad communicable disease, AIDS, and he wanted to make sure that he was going through a divorce, and I understand he gave his wife the AIDS virus as well. Anyway, we spotted him up on 9 Mile Road, and he ended up shooting and killing himself right in front of me one night. It was cold, and he put a gun to his chest and shot himself. That was one of the worst things involved with me right in front of me. But there was a lot of different murders. That's one comes to mind off the bat.
Yeah, I could imagine. Maybe you might not feel as sorry for someone like that, but that image has got to haunt you.
It does for the rest of my life. I talk about a lot of different issues, a lot of death in law enforcement. Especially with kids being involved. I still think about this 9-year little boy who drowned in a swimming pool in someone's backyard. It kind of haunts me for the rest of my life, and I even remember the young man's name. I won't say it, but God bless him, and he passed away because he drowned, and I still think about that.
What's the most rewarding thing you did when you were on the police force?
Helping people out. I really enjoyed helping people. I really enjoyed getting on the other aspect of law enforcement, profiling wanted fugitives, helping solve crimes. We had a statewide initiative with the Florida Association of Crime Stoppers, where we had every county has unsolved murders. So what I did was I put all the unsolved murders on a deck of playing cards, and issued them out to the county jail, and it gave some to the state where our prisons were. Hopefully, we get some information on some of the unsolved murders, homicides from the because these victims, their families, they need closure. And I was trying to do. We put family pictures of the deceased up on billboards and TV, and that's the most important thing I think rewarding is when one of those cold cases get solved. That's very rewarding because the family needs closure, and I was just happy to be there to help solve the case for them because people need closure, and we need to find out where their loved ones were so they can do a proper funeral and burial, and that's my most rewarding.
I don't know if you ever met Billy Jack Haynes, but I'm sure you probably heard about the recent homicide he was involved with. Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, honestly, I do not. I do not, sir. I'm sorry.
And Sonny, I'm sure you know about Sonny. That happened right in the state of Florida. Tammy Sitch. I mean, there's another repeat offender similar to the person that hit you. What do you think went wrong with the system there that she was allowed? I mean, I said she was going to kill someone years before she did it. She just kept driving under the influence.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't understand the system. Yeah, it needs to be revamped, and I have a lot of different ideas, but I kind of keep those to myself sometimes.
Yeah. You mentioned you lived in Gulf Breeze, Florida. I think Adrian Street had a school there for a period of time. Did you know him at all?
You know what? He was a great, great guy. Thank God. He was wonderful. I saw him several times. We lived in the same little small town. Went to his house a few times in Gulf Breeze. Saw him a lot of times at the Walmart, and unfortunately, he had to move back to his country, England. And then Adrian, I think, passed away last year. But him and Miss Linda was fantastic. I loved them to death. They were great people.
Yeah, and I think he was 83 or something, a brain cancer, but he was living pretty good up until the end.
You know the movie The Wrestler with
Mickey Rourke.
Mickey Rourke. He made those costumes.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Adrian made those costumes, and he made a lot of costumes, a lot of different people. He made costumes for a lot of different people in the business. It's like me. I got my wrestling boots from a guy named Bill Ash, Ash out of Arkansas. Bill, God rest his soul, I understand he's passed away now, but there's a lot of great, great guys.
Which of the wrestlers' deaths hit you the hardest? A lot of them have died so young.
The hardest one I think right now is probably going to be Steve Williams, Dr. Death Steve Williams. He was a good friend of mine. I still keep in contact with his wife out of Shreveport, Tammy. She's a wonderful, wonderful human being, great, great lady. Steve wrote a book, Dr. Death Becomes Dr. Life. And he even put in his book that, if you looked at Jeff Van Camp and Humongous, you wouldn't think I was humongous because of my demeanor and my looks. But Steve was a great, great guy. And I remember one night, Rob Rick Steiner, we was coming back from Houston, Texas. And we all lived in a little town called Pineville outside of Alexandria in Louisiana. And we came across they was about maybe 30 minutes before me, and they came across a bad accident in a little town called Bunkie, outside of Bunkie, Louisiana. And these cars I guess they hit head on, and they rode up on two fiery car crashes and helped save a life. Steve did. And what a great, great guy Steve was. I can't say enough about Steve. We traveled together to a lot of different places, and I'm missing. God rest his soul.
And he's definitely known as one of the toughest wrestlers ever, and I believe a multiple-time All-American. Plus, I think he played football too, didn't he?
Yeah, in Oklahoma, because we went out to when he was in Oklahoma, Steve one time said, "Come on, Jeff, I'll take you to Oklahoma." We actually went to their weight room and worked out in the weights of Oklahoma. And Steve was famous with Oklahoma Sooners. Great guy, man. A great guy.
How was Ted DiBiase?
Ted he was different. I liked him. He was all about business. His family had I believe a restaurant in the Mississippi area, and he kept inviting me to go there, but I never ended up going to, I guess, a barbecue or smokehouse in southern Mississippi. His family had, and he was just a great guy. I mean, I didn't really spend a lot of time other than in the locker rooms with Ted, but every time I saw him, he was a great guy. Like Hacksaw Jim Duggan, great guy.
Yeah, Hacksaw, I've worked with him before. We used to use him in this company up here in Canada, Great North Wrestling, all the time. Very much like his character on TV in WWE, but I understand in the Mid-South days, he was a bit more edgy outside the ring, wasn't he?
Well, a little bit. He was, I remember one time me and Steve went to his house for a Halloween party after we got done wrestling. I think Lake Charles or somewhere. It was great. But Jim was a great guy. He and his wife at the time, and just a great guy. We had a wonderful time.
Now, you've wrestled in a lot of territories that are known for great food. What territory would you say had the best places to eat, the best barbecue?
Southern Florida, lower Alabama, LA, Pensacola, Mississippi. Places in Texas had great barbecue, great barbecue. But that's probably the best places to eat, Mid-South and Continental.
Did you ever wrestle for World Class itself, that territory?
No, I don't believe so, no.
Did you have much interactions with the Von Erichs wrestling in Houston and other places?
Yeah, we did. Bill Watts was in tight with the Von Erichs. Anyway, the father, I sometimes names Fritz, right? He and Fritz, we had a lot of different interactions. Guys would come over from his area, and our guys would go to his area, and we'd all work together in Oklahoma City, Dallas, Houston, and places like that. So we had a lot of interactions with the Von Erichs.
Did you know Kevin or Kerry at all?
I didn't know them at the time. I was back in the day, and I thought they were great guys. They were down to earth. Unfortunately, a lot of tragedy in their family. I'm sorry. May they rest in peace.
Did you end up seeing the Iron Claw, the movie about their family that recently came out?
I can't do that. I can't. I knew him personally, and it hits home too much. I can't do it. I can't watch it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Another guy you worked with was Jimmy Golden, who was Bunkhouse Buck in WCW. What was he like?
Jimmy is a great guy. His cousin's a Ron Fuller.
Yeah, I heard.
Anyway, I didn't know if you knew that or not. They're all related. And anyway, Jimmy's a great guy. The whole family, it was fantastic. They treated me like gold, and I can't say enough great things about Ron and Robert, his brother Robert, and Armstrongs and Jimmy. And I don't know if you knew Bob's wife, Gail. She was a sweetheart. Loved her to death.
Did you know the Armstrong kids at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I knew Brian before he became Road Dogg. He went to the Marine Corps. He graduated from Gulf Breeze High School and went right into the Marine Corps. And I knew Brian before he was a wrestler. And Brad, I met all of them. It's unfortunately Brad was, he died way too early. That's another one. Brad, and now Bob's gone, and Steve's having mental issues, problems, and Scott's a great guy. I miss talking to Scott. And Brian's a great guy.
I heard Bob didn't even want to bother getting cancer treatment and just chose to have it take over, basically. Did you?
Yeah, after his wife Miss Gail passed away, he just said, it was time. And I don't blame him. If something happens to me or my wife, I just soon let the good Lord take care of business, and I got better things waiting for me up in heaven.
Wrestling was obviously a lot stiffer back in those days, especially territories like Mid-South. Did you have an opponent that was the stiffest of anyone you ever faced?
I think, honestly, believe it or not, probably Jody Hamilton. The Flame was very stiff on me.
Yeah, Jody. I didn't know Jody Hamilton was the Flame. I knew he was one of the Assassins.
Yeah, the Flame Assassin. Yeah, he was very stiff, very stiff with me. I don't know, maybe because I was stiff with him. I don't know, but God rest his soul as well. I saw him a couple few years ago at a reunion in Dothan, Alabama, and Jody. We kind of make amends, but at the time, when he was working, he was very stiff.
That explains why he didn't have sympathy when I wrestled for him once and some guy complained that I was too stiff, because I remember him just kind of brushing it right off. So that would explain a thing or two.
Yeah, he was most definitely stiff.
Who was your favorite opponent?
Probably my favorite was probably Jake, and honestly, Ric Flair. But I worked with him twice, one in Birmingham and once in Montgomery. And Ron Fuller came to me at one time and said, "Jeffrey, I'm going to put with you or Rick. We're going to sell out the house, and now Rick, don't wrestle for 30 minutes. He's going to go for an hour." So that's exactly what we did. We worked for an hour. And he was, only time he was tough potatoes when he gives those slaps in your chest. But other than that, he was amazing man to work with.
And I'm going to guess he was probably pretty nice to you behind the scenes, since you're so massive getting in the ring with him.
Well, and I'm going to let you know, we kind of drank a few beers together as well. Rick's a great guy. And, we didn't call Rick or Ric Flair or Mr. Flair. You called him the Champ. That's what he wanted to go by, and that's what you called him. "Hey, Champ, let's do this. Hey, Champ, where you want to go? Hey, Champ, let's go work out." That's what we called him, the Champ.
Do you regret ever that, you knew all these famous guys, and I haven't heard anyone say anything bad about you in the industry, so you probably could have gone to WCW or WWE with your size and connections. I guess you just were happy living a normal life and never bothered asking if anyone could hook you up or anything like that.
I did. Jake got with me a few years later, said, "Jeffy, if you had just stayed in the business 6 more months or a year later, they would have put you with Hulk Hogan and Andre, and because you'd worked with the big guys, and you would have had a hell of a good run." And then then I've been in the Hall of Fame, and I miss that sometimes. I miss being around the guys. I do like going to the conventions, but I do miss that part of it. I do miss that.
Did you ever wrestle Andre?
No, I met him a few times. He was a great guy. If you didn't think he was in the business, he was totally different. But once you knew he was in the business, he was a different man. I understand he could put down some beer, that's for sure.
Yeah. Did you ever go out with him, or because of your kayfabe, you didn't?
I never went out with Andre, but I heard a lot of great stories about him. He was a great guy.
Yeah, it's good to hear that, because you hear sometimes that he was jealous of the bigger guys and wouldn't necessarily treat them nice. But it's good to hear that you were a big guy, and
I heard that he didn't like people stepping over the top rope to get into ring. Well, I'm a big guy, and that's how I got into the ring. That was part of my gimmick. I stepped over the top rope, and I understand he didn't care for that, but that was my part of my gimmick. I stepped over the top rope.
Here's a fan saying, "June 3rd, 1985, you beat Ric Flair by disqualification in Birmingham, Alabama." Do you have any memories of that match? And what was your reaction when you heard you were beating Flair?
Yeah, honestly, I beat Flair, and under the DQ, he DQ'd himself. The fans in the ring and in the auditorium would not allow me to leave that auditorium unless I had that belt with me. So, the fans pretty much, they knew I won that match, and the fans, even though they under disqualification, he got to keep it, but I held that belt until the next night in Montgomery, Alabama, because the fans, thank God the fans were there, because they did not allow me to leave that ring without holding that belt over my head.
Oh, you were the baby face then. Do you remember the finish of that match?
I honestly, no, I don't. I'm hoping that people would come forward with some more photographs, because I only have a couple. And I think they might have taped it as well, because I know Gordon Soley was there, and I think they taped it. I haven't seen any matches from that. I would love to go back and watch that.
Did you ever know Gordon Soley?
Yeah, Ron Fuller brought him in as an announcer in the Continental days. and we did TV and everything out of Birmingham, and he was always there. I never really got to meet him outside of the arena area, but he was always nice to me, and because I never talked on the stage.
What kind of? I know you had Humperdinck as a manager. Did you ever have any other famous managers?
That's pretty much the majority of the managers in Pensacola. I had Ron Fuller, then went to Mid-South, Humperdinck, and so that was pretty much it.
I know Hulk Hogan wrote in his book that Humperdinck had the stinkiest feet ever when he'd take his shoes off. Is that true at all, or is that Hogan telling it otherwise?
No, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And he was the ugliest man you ever want to meet. He was ugly, but that man could get some women. I don't know how he did it, but that man was ugly and stunk, and and he could get the women.
He made it to WWE too. I think he managed Bam Bam Bigelow for a while.
Oh, he did. Oh, that's awesome. I'm glad for him. And God rest his soul as well. He was a great guy, and he was very great, sort of a great sense of humor.
Was Jim Ross in Mid-South at all when you were there?
Yeah, he was an announcer. Him and his son was it, and then Grizzly. You remember Grizzly? Jake's dad was there as well. But Jim Ross was there. Absolutely. I didn't really get to meet Jim Ross outside the arena because I didn't do that. But I mean, he did several of my matches. Jim Ross did.
What do you think about the success he's had over the years? He's still announcing.
Oh my God, isn't it fantastic? I mean, what a great guy. I mean, he's very well deserved, very professional, and he knows the business and knows what to say to keep the audience interested. Great guy.
What was the biggest police chase you were involved with when you had to chase down a criminal?
Let's see. One of the big chases. We had several high-speed chases. There were so many that I know. One, the Alabama. They always told us if you go to the state of Alabama and you're running into them and you come on the radio and they tell you to back off, that means they're about ready to shoot. So if you ran in the state of Alabama from Florida, you better watch out because they don't play.
Yeah, you don't see up here in Canada too many people running, but I know there's a lot of YouTube videos I come across from the U.S. It seems like maybe it's because a lot of them are illegals, but it seems like people run a lot more in the U.S. for whatever reason.
Why, I don't know. I don't understand it, but don't if you're going to do it, don't do it in Alabama.
Yeah. My dad was a police officer as well. He always said the best thing to do is be as polite as possible and do what they say if you ever.
And I appreciate that. Just be truthful, because honestly, law enforcement, we hear so many lies, and we can pretty much tell if you're lying or not from the body language. Just tell the truth. Whatever. Just tell the truth.
Now, I know you already talked some about Dick Murdoch, but as we close it down here, someone wants to know more details about your matches with Dick Murdoch during the Mid-South in the summer of '85.
He was an amazing individual. God rest his soul. Dick, like I was mentioning, he knew several of the individuals that I worked with and knew what kind of person I was before I even went to Mid-South. And apparently, I understand he got with Bill Watts and said he wanted to have the first match with me on TV to put me over, to have me a good run in Mid-South. And by God, he did. I mean, I can't say enough great things about what he did. Even a few other shows we worked together with in Oklahoma and Texas and Louisiana. I mean, he was a great human being and great professional guy. I can't say enough great things about him. There's a lot of great guys I worked with, and he was one of them. Thank God he was there and did what he did for me.
Did you ever meet Terry Funk?
I did not get to meet Terry Funk.
What about Kevin Sullivan?
I never got to meet Terry Sullivan either.
Yeah, Sullivan would have loved you in the Florida territory.
Well, I'm sure, absolutely.
Your gimmick would have fit perfectly there. Is there anywhere fans can follow you if they want to look you up on social media? You mentioned earlier you try to keep a low profile for at least one reason.
I'm on Facebook under Lord Humongous. A couple of my great people who run that for me, Dave Augusta and Marshall out of Pensacola. They help run the site for me. Lord Humongous on Facebook, and Jeff Van Camp on Facebook as well.
Do you do any autograph mailing or anything like that if people want to pay for your autographs?
Yeah, I'll do. Yeah, I do that. I every once in a while I'll go to. I'll get contacted by some of these companies, and they'll I'll go to. I went to North Carolina a couple of times. I went to Albany, New York, Dothan, Alabama, a few areas. The promoters have contacted me, and they'll send me to make me travel to these locations, and I'll sell some stuff.
What are you benching these days? Your chest looks thicker than mine, and you're definitely a bit older than I am.
I'm 62 now, but I work out as much as I possibly can. I do more reps now than I do heavy weight. Back then, I used to work out heavy all the time. Now I just do lighter weight and more reps. That makes sense.
Well, you're looking great. I appreciate talking to you, and I'll let you close this down with whatever you want to tell the fans.
Man, thank you so much for keeping me in your mind and your thoughts. I'm so humbled and honored by the fans still remember who I was and what I used to do for a living. I can't say enough wonderful things about you, and thank you for allowing me to be on your podcast. And thank you so much for everything.